Psychological horror. Easily the best and most underdeveloped genre in entertainment for many reasons, in my opinion. I'm going to be mainly talking about psychological horror games, since I feel that's where the genre shines the most. That's right, I'm talking about the Undertales, the ddlcs, the Omoris, all that good stuff. So without further ado, here's why psychological horror is one of the best genres and my personal favorite genre in anything related to entertainment. Also, keep in mind that all of this is my opinion. I just want to express my love towards psychological horror. So please take everything with a grain of salt. All of this is super subjective, and enjoy the video. So let's start off with talking about horror in general. Horror. If we're talking about games, it's been a genre that has evolved tremendously throughout the years. Like, we can talk about games like Silent Hill, the ones that PewDiePie and Markiplier were playing back in the day, bro. Those kinds of horror games. Since the idea was new of like, oh my god, you can be like in a horror type setting in a game. It was absolutely amazing. It was mind-blowing. Seeing your jump scares and stuff, being able to walk around in the world like Slender Man, killing you from behind, bro. It was creepy, okay? But the thing about horror is that it's progressively gotten a lot blander with the years. Of course, there are always exceptions, but slowly, without people realizing it, there's been this sort of rule set that you have to follow in order to make a horror game. For example, it has to be a dark place, abandoned house, creepy church, abandoned mansion, haunted mansion, things like that. It's been a lot more repetitive with the years. Again, of course, there are exceptions. For example, Five Nights at Freddy's. That game has an absolutely incredible lore, and it uses jump scares and stuff, but it's kind of different. Another great example of an exception is Puppet Combo. If you haven't seen Puppet Combo games, their games are the stereotypical horror type games, but it's done in a super unique way. The execution of what they're trying to go for, like the old school graphics, how creepy and just eerie everything is.
I feel like he don't already went into the store. Ooh, I heard something. Go, hurry up, go into the store. Go behind the register.
I think Puppet Combo is one of the exceptions that does horror very well while maintaining that sort of status quo, I guess you can say. But what I'm trying to get to here is that horror has been relying a lot on jump scares. For instance, you play whatever horror game, right? And then, oh my god, you get jump scared and you play and you try to beat it, and okay, you get out of the game. But here's the thing. You'll remember how you felt when you got jump scared, for example. But will you remember the story behind that jump scare? Again, it's not in every single case. There are a lot of horror stories that do it very well while maintaining the status quo. But here's the thing with psychological horror. It does it well consistently. And you may ask, and that is the theme of fear. The fear that psychological horror games give you is something incredibly unique, and it's something that I personally think cannot be replicated with a normal horror game. What do I mean? I'm mainly going to be using ddlc, Omori, Undertale as my examples because those are the three games that I absolutely adore in this genre. But these games, while there might be some jump scares here and there, it does not rely on them. It doesn't depend on loud screaming noises or things that are typical in horror. While it might use them sometimes, it does not depend on them. A perfect example of this is in Omori. Something is always present in the game. From the very beginning, something is always there. But the thing is, something is just there. It very rarely like sneaks up to you from behind or something and then just boom, jump scare. Always just there. And from an objective point of view, it might seem like, oh, it's just a little like thing there. It's literally just something. And why would I be afraid of that? And that's a unique thing about psychological horror, or in this case, Omori. It uses something as this element of fear. While you might be escaping in this world that Omori lives in, there's always something to remind you that something isn't right. So from the very beginning of Omori, you're already thinking, what's gonna happen next? When is the next thing gonna happen after the very first like jump scare that you get? For example, when you always look at the mirror, you're on the back of your mind, you're expecting something to happen. When will something happen? When will it happen? That fear is something that's unique to this genre. I'll be talking about this a little bit later, but it's not something that horror does as well as psychological horror does. Another example is in Doki Doki, where when you first see and witness Sayori's death, the impact that you get from that makes you already think like, okay, what is going to happen? You're afraid of the game. Once Act 2 of ddlc begins, you start seeing everything glitching out. The music is weird. You become afraid of the game instead of being afraid of an object. Horror usually relies on an object, a monster, something that will jump scare you and make you scream and scare the shit out of you sometimes, but psychological horror makes you afraid of the game. Specifically talking about ddlc, always hitting you with unexpected things. When you start expecting things, they don't happen. But when you don't expect something, they start happening. And if we're talking about Omori, you're playing this game like this normal fantasy RPG, but then you'll get reminded every here and there that something is wrong. Everything is slightly off. After the first couple of minutes, you know that shit isn't right. So you're always on guard to see what could happen next, even if it doesn't happen for a really long time. This is a fear different from getting jump scared. When you're about to get jump scared, you kind of subconsciously know that it's about to happen. For example, things like FNAF, when you run out of power or when you messed up. It's just from time to time that you don't expect it at all. What I'm trying to say here is that the type of horror that things like ddlc and Omori portray is a horror that stays with you in the most uncanny way. It deadass felt like something was behind me as I was playing in certain moments of the game. It just happens. This is the kind of fear that I refer to. The fear when looking at any mirror in Omori. The fear of always refreshing your game files in ddlc. If I could make an analogy, it would simply be that psychological horror is a long-term jump scare, whereas horror is a short-term jump scare. And the main difference between these two is that the long-term jump scare leaves you with a bigger impact. Be real. If you've played Undertale, ddlc, Omori, or something that's just known to be a good psychological horror experience, have you forgotten the impact of any of these experiences? This genre is a genre that stays with you, whether you know it or not. Personally, when I first finished ddlc, right, I was in absolute shock. It was absolutely genius to see this anime dating sim be disguised into the amazing psychological horror experience that it ended up being. Seeing how it literally acted like a virus, all for the purpose to add on to the whole experience and be able to recollect everything in a way that makes sense in a believable way. When I first saw Sayori's death, I could not stop listening to the That OST kept replaying in my head over and over again after I finished playing it for the first time. It just had that big of an impact, man. This is much more unique to ddlc because the build-up, how this quote-unquote boring part of the game is absolutely essential for Act 2 and beyond that to hit as hard as it did. If you by some miracle played ddlc blind, then you were expecting the game to be this generic dating sim, and maybe there was like this good drama element in the game, but that is as far as it went. When shit started going down, it was crazy. It was simply crazy. Was there ever a chance that you would stop playing the game after you saw Sayori's death? That's how insanely impacting that moment was.
This game was the first to have me, experience nightmares in a long time. It's kind of crazy. This was the first game in a while to actually make me feel uncomfortable, and I like that. Thing is, this game hits you in stages. It goes from you thinking it's a standard visual novel with the whole cutesy, kawaii, high school life type shit, and then it turns it into sort of an emotional drama. Then it turns it into somewhat of a slice of life, really like depressing, sort of pressing kind of drama. It pulls at you. And then it hits you on some next level like school day shit, but it goes a step beyond that. I think now we're on some flowy shit. I love how this game delivers all of those escalations to you after like waiting a while, like it doesn't force it on you right away. It's just like, okay, you think it's this? We've done it for about like 30 minutes now. Bam! You get hit with another part.
And as for Omori, again, every single time that you would look at a mirror, like I literally would look at the mirror in real life, in the dark, and be kind of scared, bro. I can't be the only one, be honest. And things like Undertale, when it was a lot more innovative. Deleting the save file thing when Flowey was going crazy, like the freaking fourth wall breaking with Sans and all that stuff. All of that sits with you in a very weird way. It's like, oh shit, they know like that playing this game right now. This isn't the case with Omori because Omori is just a story and just a psychological horror experience for the character. You're experiencing what Omori or Sunny is feeling, right? You're experiencing like the dreams, you're experiencing his anxieties and his fears. Whereas in contrast with ddlc, you're literally experiencing everything yourself because it's made for you. Literally when Monica starts talking to you, right? You're playing the game as you. She knows it's a game and she's talking to you.
The whole point of Monica like saying these things is that it's a complete role reversal. Monica is not taking the game seriously because it's just a game. So she's literally like making fun of like all the horrible things that are going on, right? In the way that oftentimes like the player of a game would, you know?
And of course, there are a lot of other genres that do the game is aware it's a game thing. But the way that ddlc did it was very unique. And the thing about psychological horror is that these games are extremely memorable. How you start noticing the small things when you finish the game. For example, in ddlc, you notice that Monica is the only girl that's directly staring at you. You also notice that in every soundtrack, like there's a piano present and that like represents Monica. These are very few examples, but ddlc has it all over the place, right? And in Omori's case, like when you start the game, you start seeing something in a tree log, for example, and you start seeing other things that are all over the game that really foreshadow the climax. Those small things, especially when you replay the game, hits you harder, man. Despite going off about ddlc and Omori, I still believe psychological horror is at its baby stages. Even though there's a lot of amazing psychological horror experiences out there, I still believe that it really has so much potential. There is so much to be explored in terms of what psychological fear is and how it can be done in so many ways. There's so many ways that psychological fear can be done. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I think games are the best way to expand on this potential. I'm sure that there are so many unique ways that showcase fear that are yet to come. If you thought an anime girl hacking your computer was as far as it went, I believe that there is still a lot that can be done to scare the shit out of us. But that being said, something like ddlc cannot happen again. It simply can't happen again. It was a one-time thing that was incredibly innovative and had perfect execution back then. If something were to be similar, the comparison would be inevitable. For example, if a game were to be disguised as something else, it'd be like inevitably start thinking about ddlc. But that being said, I do believe that there are so many other ways to impact the player, viewer, reader, whatever source of entertainment that you're using, the way that ddlc did. It's just something that hasn't manifested yet. It's like if someone told you that there are more colors of the spectrums than the one that we know, but you literally can't imagine how that color looks like. You get me? It's something that you literally just can't imagine right now. It's not a genre that you have to follow a specific amount of rules to be able to execute it well. For example, like a platforming game, there are certain things that you have to do in order to like be able to execute it well. A Metroidvania, an RPG. But the amount of freedom that psychological horror has is a freedom that no other genre has. You are free to scare the shit out of people however you see fit. Just think about it. An anime dating simulator was hiding the insane experience that ddlc ended up being. Was that concept something that you could have thought about before the release of ddlc? So here's my advice for anyone that wants to create an incredible psychological horror experience. Be it in a movie, in a book, a game, whatever it is. Create your own experience. You can look at what other media has done in terms of how you want to execute the idea, but I'm 100% sure that the next psychological horror phenomenon is going to be something very unique. Don't try to replicate what the past did, replicate what you see in the future. I literally cannot imagine what the next big psychological horror game is going to look like. I seriously cannot. Again, re-emphasizing the example of like the color that doesn't exist. And as for deltarune, I don't know how far it's gonna go into this genre and the whole Snowgrave route. But I'm sure that someone out there, someone that's working very hard out there, is going to create something that will once again scare the shit out of every single one of us. And it's going to be epic. That is psychological horror, and that is why I love this genre to death. So I hope you enjoyed my fanboying, and please tell me in the comments below what you think about this genre and just how these games have impacted your life, because I can tell you for sure that they have impacted me insanely in my life. And I seriously cannot wait for the next psychological horror experience. Also, bro, Monica's the best girl.